Greetings from the Country Dance and Song Society, and welcome to our 7th CDSS web chat on the topic of diversifying income, thinking outside the money basket. I'm Linda Henry, the CDSS Community Resources Manager, and joining me this evening are my coworkers, Sarah Pilzer, our Operations Manager, and Nikki Perez, Membership Coordinator. And we are thrilled that there were over 125 organizers who registered for this event. Probably this is the most people we've ever had signing up. So we know that this topic must be very pertinent for many organizers from 31 states and 4 provinces. So for those of you who are not viewing screens, I'll give you a brief explanation of what we're seeing on our PowerPoint slides. By the way, these will be posted on the CDSS website as well as a recording of the web chat. So if you're a compulsive note taker like me, you can just sit back and relax and know that you can access this information anytime. So this first slide gives an overview of our format. I'll be giving a brief introduction, and then we'll hear from 3 wonderful guests that I'll introduce along the way. And while you are listening to our guests, if you have a particular question, you can type it into the chat bar, and please include your name. And then we'll have about half an hour for our Q&A and wrap it up with some resources to send home with you. So for starters, I'd like to thank you all for joining us. And we are very aware that it's the organizers of music, dance, and song communities that are keeping these traditions alive. And we're working very hard at CDSS to be creating and offering a wide range of resources, the web chat being one of them. And I'll tell you more of that as we wrap up this web chat. But we know that this is a pretty universal topic and that many dancers are having trouble making ends meet. It can be a little uncomfortable to talk about money in this context of this activity that we do to escape from the business of day-to-day life. But we know that dealing with finances is part of what organizers have on their plates. So we're hoping to build a community of organizers where discussing topics like this can be not only accepted, but encouraged. So we hope to learn from and inspire each other, because the world in this day and age certainly needs these opportunities to bring joy to our communities through dance and song. So we'll start off with our first guest, Rob Satelli from Atlanta's Chattahoochee Contra Dancers. And here's a glimpse of his dance on the screen, and you can read a bit about if you were in the Atlanta area and wanted to go to one of their Friday night dances. So Rob, whenever you're ready, we'll kick it off, and I'll show the slides that we've prepared.
Okay, so I'm Rob Satelli from Atlanta. And first I'd say we're not very good at fundraising, we don't think. We really just try to balance our expenses with our cash box door take. But having said that, our attendance was declining since like 2011. And in 2017, it was just getting clearly unsustainable. With about 75 dancers each Friday, and we had to do something. And so we started sharing our situation with our dancers, and you know, it was sort of a one-time emergency, or in that context, people pitched in a lot. We got a lot of donations, and I should say, historically, I guess our dance weekend is sort of fundraising. It's by far the biggest way we raise money. And it seemed okay to lose a little on our Friday dance series, because the dance weekend, we could count on about $5,000 profit. And I think a lot of dances have that. But our attendance kept dropping. We were in trouble 2.5 years ago. So we set up a donation page on the website. We talked about it at every dance. People donated, multiple thousands of dollars in total to sort of buy us a little time. Seth Tempfer invented the idea of writing a custom contra dance, and we auctioned that off at our dance weekend. That was very successful. Yeah, you can go to the next page if you want. And we needed, well, so the big thing that happened, we compared our dance. I'm going to go a little out of order. We benchmarked our dance against 7 other contra dances in the Southeast, and we found that our venue was really expensive compared to everybody else. And the biggest reason, if we looked at the other dances, if our venue cost more similar to theirs, we could break even or almost break even. So we desperately started negotiating out of our old contract and into a new city government dance hall in the city of Decatur. And that's really turned out to be a huge improvement. There's lots of restaurants we can walk to. It's a place young people like to go on Friday night. So instead of driving out of town for 15 minutes, now our dance is sort of in a fun part of town. And the venue costs less than half our previous venue. So we're sort of being subsidized maybe by the city of Decatur a little bit. They're giving us a really good deal, but we really promoted the value of our dance as an amenity for their mission of giving activities to all the residents of Decatur. So far for 2 years, it's been a great win-win. And we've kept our admission price the same at $10. We needed new sound equipment for our new venue. So we did a special purpose fundraising for $4,500. We had this big thermometer and we talked about it every dance. And within 3 months, we got another $4,500 for that. We experimented with a sponsor dance idea just to sort of layer like a birthday party or an anniversary on top of a normal dance, kind of just have a cake and celebrate someone's event and just have them chip in something like 75 or 150. And we've done that maybe 5 times, but we haven't sold it as well as we could probably. And it hasn't been a giant fundraiser, maybe $500-700 in total. But so that's kind of all the fundraising ideas. Our biggest things are our dance weekend and moving to a venue that seems to be working a little better and is much cheaper. Let's see, do we have another slide? I would say this entire time, since we saw our attendance drop 9 years ago from say 135 to now of about 75 dancers on a typical Friday, we're really struggling to understand, is that just a national thing or what? We've got to try to do better than that. And we just keep trying. And again, in 2020, our top initiative as our steering committee of 9 people, we voted to work on keeping the new dancers that show up and trying to find more new dancers through outreach and things like that. I guess another thing is getting our regular dancers to come more often. But we've balanced our budget, but we're still concerned. I mean, we still have this gentle downward trend in attendance. So even though we're balanced this year, I don't know, we've got to solve the attendance thing better. But we've got our steering committee and a big group of our core dancers are making more of an effort to get to know these new dancers that come in. They're often younger, and we're trying hard to get them to go out to dinner with us afterwards and get to know them quickly and try to help them form this fun, healthy habit. There might be one more slide or 2. We did, I would say when we had this crisis 2.5 years ago, we had been putting off some dancer behavior problems. We had about 5 dancers that if you talk to some older dancers, do we have any problems we should be solving? This kept coming up. So we dealt with this, and like I say, there were about 5 people we needed to talk to, work with in different ways 2.5 years ago. And I'd say we have about 2 dancers a year we work with each year to solve little behavior problems. But our goal is to look more on the positive side and just have the best contra dance culture we can, with fun etiquette and great consent habits and things like that. But this has been an issue we think has helped a little. I guess there's one more slide.
I do want to chime in and make sure everybody knows that we had a web chat, our number 5 web chat, that's specifically about building safe dance communities, that's jam-packed with lots of useful information about that. So next slide.
Thank you. So there should be an outcome slide. There we go. Just to summarize, so in our new venue, we're actually putting a little money in the bank. We're losing a little bit on our Friday series, like between $1,000 and $2,000 a year. And then we make that $5,000 on the dance weekend. So we're putting a little money in the bank the last couple of years. We've retained some great new dancers. So we're sustainable at this time, but we've got to stop this long-term trend of losing dancers. And we think the key is new and younger dancers. And that's it.
Thank you, Rob. Next, we'll hear from Susan Amase from Country Dance New York in New York City. And this is a dance that includes both English country and contra dancing. So I've asked Susan to make sure she highlights any resources that would be of special interest for all of the ECD organizers listening in. So Sarah, Susan.
Hi, yes, I'm from Country Dance New York, and I just want to preface this by saying that my role at CDNY is not a fundraiser. I just happened into that. I'm an organizer, and I love English country dancing, and my goal is to keep it vital and alive and to get other people to dance with. So about 7 or 8 years ago, we used to have a third musician every maybe third Tuesday, because we dance on Tuesdays and we dance on an occasional Friday, which is an advanced dance. And we have very, very high rent, which is one of our main problems. We pay $430 a night on a Tuesday night to rent our venue. So it's really hard to sustain that by the box office. But 7 or 8 years ago, we would hire a third musician. And I noticed that more people attended on those evenings. And it was a much more lively and vital evening. And so I wondered, I went to the board and we didn't have enough money to hire a third musician for the other nights. And I thought, well, maybe I'll start a fund. And so I talked to the dancers. And a lot of people felt the same way that I did, that they love to have that diversity of the music, of the third instrument there. And so our attendance did pick up. So we asked people to donate money for that third musician. And I thought, well, maybe this will last for maybe a season. But 8 years later, this is our most popular fund. And I think why it works is that the dancers themselves have become involved in it and taken it on because they love it. I talked to them about it, why we needed it. They see the absolute results. So it's a specific fund and they get to see the results. And we even have an anonymous donor at this point that matches dollar for dollar. So at this point, it is now sustaining our third musician for the season. So that really helps when you're paying a lot of rent. But it has brought in more musicians, which bring in more variety and more energy. So that was the first thing that I started. And then recently, we we have a lot of Friday dances, a few of them a year, and they are for advanced dancing because we want to keep our Tuesday nights welcoming and friendly for all. So for our regular dancers to come, they like to come in and be able to not be a dance angel for one night and to be able to dance and listen to the music. But we have a lower attendance on those nights. So the board looked at the figures and said we may not be able to continue our Friday dances. So again, I went and talked to the dancers and said, you know, do you like the Friday dances? And many did. So I decided to start a new specific fund for this, and that's our 50/50 raffle. And a 50/50 raffle is one of the easiest ways in the world to fundraise. You go and you buy a big roll of raffle tickets and you sell them two for $5 or whatever the amounts are. And after you collect all the money, you have one raffle ticket drawn, and the profit is split between CDNY and the dancer who has the winning card. And we've been able to sustain now our Friday dances by this because I could raise $200-300 in the 50/50 raffle. And people like it. I'm not just asking them for more money. I'm giving them a way to possibly go home with a couple $100s. And by talking to some of the dancers, some people actually made their annual donations to specific Friday night dances. So to help sustain them because they love them. So I have found that one of the key things is talking to the dancers, getting them involved in the fundraising so that they understand what's going on. So we also have dance sponsorships, which means that we encourage people to support the musicians. You pay for the musicians as a minimum price, and then you can do whatever you want at that dance. It will be your dance. You can, if early enough, you can pick the callers and the musicians. You can invite your even non-dancing friends to come. Sometimes you can pick some of the dances that are danced, and you have a built-in party of your dance friends that will be coming to help you celebrate your birthday, your anniversary, or whatever it is that you are celebrating. And it's really fun. And again, it's another way of getting the community involved in the evening. And when they get to pick the talents and pick some of the dances, you get a little more variety there. And it's really fun. And it does bring more people in. So fundraising isn't just raising the money. It's also ways to bring more people in and to have more fun. The other way that we have raised money is bequests. You can leave CDNY money in your will. And several people have done that. But one in particular is a longtime dancer, Wayne Batchelor, who loved English country dancing. And he left a very specific money for us to use for English country dancing for a 10-year period. And because of that, I can use his money to pay for one of the Friday night dances and to be able to hire out-of-town callers or musicians that I would normally not be able to pay for. As a matter of fact, this year, we are using the money to pay for Joseph Pimentel and Goldcrest to come in April. So it's really very exciting that I could just do that and not have to worry about paying for that dance. In the past, we have done other things to raise money. We used to have every other year fall weekend where people would come and dance all weekend, and it was English, and the callers and the musicians would donate their time. But again, just like our venue in Manhattan, the cost was just really rising and we couldn't afford to do it anymore. But we used to bring in enough money that would pay for English for 2 years. And so that was quite a loss when we couldn't do that anymore. But in some other venues where a hall is cheaper, that would be a great idea. Or even if you couldn't do it for a whole weekend, to be able to do it for a day or two would be good. So, and we do have our membership. We have a lot of English country dance members, and that membership helps boost, and also it helps our members become part of it, and they get more information, and they have more say. And I think that that's really all I have to say right now, except that I stress getting dancers involved in the fundraising.
Great, Susan. So next we have Jenny Wharton from Toronto, Ontario, Contra Dance. And she is a person who has given a lot of thought to the fundraising topic, what particular ideas and strategies might work for any given dance. And she's put together a wonderful PowerPoint that she's going to be sharing with us. So hang on just a minute, Jenny. We're going to switch to your PowerPoint. Okay.
Okay. Unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, good. So Toronto, like a lot of other groups, was finding that it was not making the necessary revenue at the door. And if your group is anything like mine, when you talk about fundraising, a lot of people started to look really uncomfortable, and maybe they kind of looked at their laps, or maybe they threw out a bunch of ideas and you had to sit down and figure out which one was going to be right for your group. So what I put together was a way of looking at ideas and deciding how they're going to work in the context of your group and your group's fundraising needs. Can I have the next slide, please? So the first thing we want to think about is, why do we need this money? Because there's a vast difference between fundraising for a one-time expense, like the new sound system that Rob mentioned, or coming up with an ongoing alternative revenue stream, which is a lot of what both Susan and Rob have been talking about. That one-time expense is going to reward one-time large events or activities, things that you maybe do only once a year or only once ever. But if you're just needing to make bank, you're going to have to find something that you can do over and over again. At least that was our experience. So first you want to think about that. Next slide, please. You want to think about what your group has, what it has going for it. Are you a nonprofit, or do you have registered charity status? We do not, which means that certain grants are not available to us. Corporate donations are not available to us. What we do have is an enthusiastic and robust group of volunteers. They don't all have lots of time. What we do have is a well-attended dance with an enthusiastic community who are engaged and active. And those are all resources that you can call upon to make your fundraising a success. Not everybody in our community has deep pockets, but they do have a lot of goodwill and a lot of willingness to help out. Next slide, please. So look at your opportunities. Do you have opportunities at your regular events? Are there other activities? Are there special events that you do, like the activity that Susan mentioned? Where are people asking for things that you might be able to provide for money? Next slide, please. And when you're looking at these opportunities, that shouldn't be there. We just did that. Okay. For example, not for my dance community, but at my orchestra, a lot of people are asking for water bottles, and that would be an opportunity of something that we can provide and charge money for. This is not the right slide. Could we move on, please? So now we get to evaluating, is this even a good idea? So there's a couple of criteria that you need to look at when you're evaluating whether something's a good idea. Next slide. First of all, is it going to be suitable for your group? So you don't want to choose ideas that are going to run contrary to the ethos of your group, that are going to draw a lot of attention away from your core activity. You want something that's going to fit more or less seamlessly with what you already do. I love the idea of auctioning off a dance choreographed for you, for example. That fits beautifully with what you already do. You want to look at things that work well in what you do. In Toronto, we looked at snack sales because we didn't have snacks at our dances. And that is the idea that we chose. Moving on, next slide. So you want to think about what you can add and charge money for. In general, you don't want to start charging money for something that you've already provided for free, because that erodes goodwill in your community. People feel really bad about that. But you can find the gaps in what you offer, or you can piggyback on your existing events and services. You could do a pre-dance dinner, or as I said, a snack sale, or you can think about like value-added versions of what you already do. The Flurry does this with their great little I donated buttons. Maybe you could have favorable parking spots for people who donated a certain amount. Something that just dovetails in with what you do, doesn't take anything away from anybody else, but adds value for people who are able to give you a little bit of extra money. Next slide. So I have some key questions for you. I think this is the wrong version of that. Okay, moving on. This is not the version that I intended to send. So the key questions you just want to ask is, how does this fit into what we do already? Is it going to upset anybody? Are community members likely to perceive this activity positively? Is it going to generate goodwill or badwill? You can just press the space bar to move on. So, and ideally you want everybody to say, yes, that makes sense when they encounter your activity. Next slide. 2, you want to assess your risk. A lot of activities carry with them some form of financial risk, liability, or relationship risk. So think about that before you engage in your activity. Next slide. Next slide. So first you want to think about, nitty gritty. What is this going to cost us? You can press the space bar. You don't want to sink a lot of money into a fundraiser. So it used to be that people wanted to do t-shirts a lot, and then you'd have to carry an inventory of t-shirts and order a bunch of t-shirts, and you'd always wind up with people not picking up their t-shirts, and then you'd wind up with a lot of t-shirts and no money. So you want to think about what you can get for free, what can be donated, what can be provided by a sponsor. Just press the space bar. Or what you can do via sort of a print on demand or produce on demand service spacebar with like Teespring. You want to make sure that if you can't do it, you can cover the costs with the revenue. And an example of this would be a 50-50 draw. Next slide.
I have a question for you, Jenny. Some people may not be familiar with Teespring.
Google it, teespring.com.
We have enough time if you could give a brief explanation.
Sure. Teespring is a print-on-demand t-shirt producer. So you upload your design and you set your pricing and you tell them which t-shirt styles you'd like to be made in which color. And then individuals go on and order individually their t-shirts, pay the money to Teespring. Teespring takes care of the fulfillment. And once you get above a certain threshold, I think it's $100, they send you a check for your profit on every t-shirt that you've produced. And that just means that you as a group don't have to have a tote of t-shirts sitting there in sizes that you think are the right ones for people, in colors that you think are the right ones for people, where you've spent money but not necessarily had money back.
Cool. Great, thanks.
So in general, the principle is spend as little money up front as possible to bring in as much revenue as possible. Next slide. Slide. And we can move on to the next. You also just want to consider your liability. some activities will not fit in well with either your insurance policy or perhaps your venue. And in particular, things like raffles and 50-50 draws. If you're in a church hall, double check whether they allow gambling of any form. I know that seems silly, but you don't want to damage those relationships. And you want to be very sure that you're allowed to do what you want to do. You can just press the space bar through. You also want to make sure that you're mitigating any harm that your activity might have the potential to cause. Now, we know that dancing in particular is an activity that carries some risk, but when you add a bake sale to that, you're adding a whole different form of risk, for example, in terms of allergies or food sensitivities, or again, what your hall is allowing. So think about what you're going to do to manage your risks. Spacebar. In our case, we introduced a snack sale, and when you donate a snack, we ask you to label it with all of the ingredients so that people know what they're getting into and can avoid anything that they're allergic to. We also have a completely nut-free snack sale. Next slide. So your general principle here is just make sure that you've checked all of your agreements and policies so that you know what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do, and that you're doing what you can to keep the members of your community safe. Next slide. And moving on. You also just want to make sure that you're not risking goodwill. This loops back to the suitability. Multiple appeals or drawing repeatedly from the same will erode goodwill. You need community buy-in to keep doing what you're doing. So some people have mentioned some really important factors of maintaining goodwill. Themes of transparency, keeping everybody apprised of why it is that you need extra money, what it is that you're doing with the money. Themes of community, keeping the community involved and giving them some ownership. I think some others are accessibility. Fundraisers can be really alienating, but if you keep things at a relatively accessible level, then everybody can participate. And there should always be a lack of pressure or shame associated with any fundraising. You shouldn't be browbeating people into buying your brownies. Next slide. The third vector on which we consider fundraising activities is sustainability. We're all volunteers, and we all have other volunteers with whom we work with. So your organizers are not the volunteers, and you want to make sure that you're using your volunteers in a way that's appropriate and is going to keep them coming back and working with you. People are not paying. Next slide. So you want to think about how many people this activity is going to take to pull off. You can hit spacebar through. What skills those people need, how much time and effort an activity is going to take, and how often they'll need to pull this thing off. Is it something you're going to do at every dance? Is it something you're going to do twice a year? Is it something you're only going to do once in a blue moon? Do we even have the people who have the skills and the goodwill and the time to do this thing? And do the people who have the skills want to do this? It's all very well to say we're going to design a t-shirt, but if nobody in your group is any good at design, you're going to have an ugly t-shirt. And that's not going to help you with your fundraising or your community. And then finally, what is our plan for continuing this, for sustaining this activity when the people who are doing it no longer want to do it? So next slide. Half of that slide is missing. A one-time effort is a little bit different from an ongoing campaign. A one-time effort may take a lot of people to pull off, or take a small number of people who put in a lot of effort, but it doesn't need to be repeated frequently. So those people can pull off a grand fundraising event and then go have a nap. It usually has a clear beginning and a clear end, a clear goal, and doesn't need more than one or two coordinators. But your ongoing weekly effort might be several people who pitch in week after week after week, or be one person who just takes a little bit of time out of their dance to do the thing. It should have the potential to involve as many people as possible, because you're going to need people to take over when that one key person is away or sick or busy or doesn't want to do it anymore. And you'll need community and organizer support to recruit your volunteers and to sustain that activity. So ultimately, next slide, you want to just cherish your volunteers. Remember, though, that your organizers are not the only volunteers in your community, and that it's really easy to get people to do one easy little thing who don't necessarily want to be on your organizing committee and spend vast quantities of their time doing this. Right, next slide. The final thing you want to look at is just how complicated is this project, and this goes back into our sustainability. Unless we have a volunteer or a group who are willing to devote significant time to an activity or an initiative, we need something that's straightforward, that just about anybody can pitch in and do, and that they can do with minimal instruction. And that's where, you know, having something that has a clear set of instructions will help. So we had a few ideas, and I'm just going to present them to you. And for homework or with your own committees, you can try assessing them using these various criteria. But some of the things that we came up with sitting around our table and brainstorming were a snack sale, with a weekly snack sale with some contributed snacks, some home-baked goods, the Teespring campaign that I mentioned, and you can go look up teespring.com. I don't get any money from saying that URL. Having a pre-concert or pre-dance supper. We did this at my choir, and it was really successful. It was just chili and crock pots. Raffles, 50-50 draws, a jumble sale, or house concerts. So that's my framework. In Toronto, we chose snack sales. It's gone fairly well. We bring in about $60 to $80 a dance on snacks. I bake the snacks and other volunteers bake the snacks. We have a little kit that allows anybody to run the bake sale, and one person who goes and buys samosas from the samosa factory each dance. And we sell them at a 100% markup, which means that we sell 2 samosas for $1, and they're very, very popular.
Thank you so much, Jenny. That's
You're welcome.
Plenty of ideas to last a lifetime. Okay, so now we are moving into the Q&A portion of the web chat. And we've received many questions, and Sarah will be moderating this portion. She'll read a question and pause to let our guests gather their thoughts, and then you guys can just join in when you're ready.
Yes, and for anybody who hasn't figured it out yet, we have a chat bar, which is where people are submitting questions. So if you're in Zoom and you see a little chat bubble, you can click on that to open up the chat bar and submit your questions there. So we have, starting, a question for Susan, but other folks can chime in if they have responses too. How much do you charge, or what is the price for sponsoring a dance? And I think this is for Susan, particularly your Friday night dances. What is the price for sponsoring a dance?
Okay, well, we don't have a set price. We encourage people to pay for some of the talent or all of the talent, or as much as they can. So that could be $200, $300 or more. And if they do sponsor the talent, then they can choose the talent. I mean, anybody can bring a cake and celebrate their birthday at a dance, but in order to be able to choose things, you have to be able to pay for some of the talent. Does that help?
Yeah. Rob, I think you mentioned sponsoring dances also. Do you have a set price to sponsor a dance?
Yeah, we made some posters and we've made a few announcements, and we just picked 2 price points, $75 and $150. But then on the website, you can actually contribute any amount. But we weren't thinking in terms, we did discuss the idea because we were struggling with out-of-town bands having high transportation to Atlanta. We toyed with the idea of this sponsor dance being connected with an exciting out-of-town band. But we ended up dropping that for simplicity. And so they don't get to choose the talent. Kimby Hagan, who some of you may know, she schedules the talent like 3 months in advance, and it's on the website. And then, so you can sponsor any dance you want. You can look at the talent and try to pick a band you like. And we were just picking price points we thought might be popular.
Great. Here's another question for Susan from Shira. Why did you discontinue accepting credit cards at dances? Was it at all useful and successful, or why did you stop?
We don't on Tuesdays at this point, but they do on Saturday contra dances. We just don't have not trained people to do that yet, but we find that very helpful. That people can use PayPal or credit cards, and we do want to do it. I think that was just a misprint on there. We do want to do that on Tuesday nights because we find it helpful if people, who has cash in their wallets these days. So it's very helpful to have, be able to just swipe that card, and so we don't have to have people running out to the ATM and possibly losing them.
Hey, Rob, I think you have some different ideas about ways you accept money at the door. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, Jonathan Ravito, our treasurer, he posted a Venmo thing that you scan, and he's encouraging people to pay for the dance like on their way, I guess, to eliminate any line at the door. But we have PayPal links on our website in the donation and sponsor a dance area. So we take checks, PayPal and Venmo, I think, is an easy way to use a credit card indirectly. And it's still mostly cash, but yeah, we'll take anything.
Great. Another question. There's a student group. So I assume this is a dance for students who don't have a lot of disposable income to donate or spend on, say, a bake sale. What ideas would anybody from the panel have for fundraising when your primary audience are students?
Well, we definitely want them to bring their friends because we always want to grow our community. So if people can't afford to give, then maybe they can bring a friend, and that's a really big gift as well.
Great.
I mean, I gotta say, I run the bake sale, and students are some of my best customers because 2 samosas for $1 is a really good deal.
So maybe focusing on the lower price items.
Yeah, we don't ever have anything over $3, and most of our baked goods are donated, and they're $2, $1, $2, 2 for $1. I can't think of anything that will bring in a reliable revenue stream that would cost the purchaser less than $1.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're having trouble procuring baked goods and donations, that's a whole nother thing. And that's where I think you want to sit down with your community and talk about where your individual community's strengths are and what your community can provide. And you want to talk to your attendees who are part of your community about what it costs to do this and bring them into the conversation about how you're going to sustain the activity as a group.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I have a quick comment on food. We're toying, right? We have emails going back and forth for the next steering committee meeting about providing free food at some dances. And we've noticed that English Country provides food. We've been to other contra dances that have food. And Hot Atlanta Squares is a group in Atlanta that has free food. And nobody's charging. And this reminds me, I know that Starwood Hotels and Home Depot, their loyalty experts have noticed if they give a free Coca-Cola or a free candy bar to their most loyal customers, it increases their loyalty significantly. So like this $1 gift can give you a lot more. So we're going to try having a food corner or using this little food area that would be a little more cleanup, maybe once a month for a bigger food event. We're going to experiment with some free food and see if we can increase the number of young dancers coming back.
Great idea. All right, another question. Do you have advice for still forming dance groups which may not grow to be typical dance series? So this group has dances in houses generally and keep costs low, but still lose money. So most attendees are low income. So what are your advice, if any, for people just getting started who maybe don't have a full-fledged series yet?
Well, sometimes at the beginning, callers will donate their time, and we use tape music instead of real music. I mean, I was involved in a small group on Staten Island at one point, and we did tape music, which really cuts down on the cost. And it takes a long time to grow a group. Just opening up and making it as fun as possible and having people come and bring their friends is really the best way to grow the group. But keeping those caller, you have to have a real dedicated caller to come in and volunteer. But there are some wonderful callers out there that will do that.
I think Linda might have some ideas later too about how to get groups started.
I have a funny maybe idea on that. We actually have a Tuesday dance that's in a less expensive venue. It's twice a month typically. Deanna Palumbo runs it. She donates her time as a free caller, and it's kind of an open band practice jam contra night. And so all the band members and any dancers all pay. And for years it was just $3. But right now it's been raised to $5. And typically we have about 11 paying musicians and maybe 6 to 10 paying dancers. So it's kind of that house party size group. And so the caller's free thanks to Deanna. And it's just everybody who wants to play in the band or dance, they all chip in. And there's free food.
All about the free food.
Yeah.
All right. What is the best way to poll/survey a dance community if the organizers want to determine which of the fundraising ideas will work best? How do you, yeah.
I mean, I think if you're keeping your risk low, you try things and you see what works for your community. And as long as you're minimizing your own financial outlay and keeping the goodwill and the abilities of your community in mind, what have you got to lose by trying a Teespring campaign or trying a 50-50 draw or trying a raffle and then seeing how it flies with your community?
Have you done any follow-up surveys with anybody about, did they like these efforts, or was it sort of more, if you made money, then that was a success?
That's exactly it.
We haven't done follow-up on fundraising, but we do have surveys about how are we doing. And people like to give their comments, and we find out what people like and what people don't like from them. You can do Google search, surveys online. They're very easy to do, and it really doesn't cost anything. And I think it's good to do every once in a while. And also talking to them in person like I do, but I like to do that.
Great. Do you have any information to report from groups using sliding scales? Do any of your groups use a sliding scale? How does that go for you?
Our group uses a pay what you can. We made more money when we switched to pay what you can.
Really?
So it's gone pretty well. The trick was that, and it goes back to transparency, right at the door, we have a sign saying it costs approximately this much per dancer to put on a dance. I think it's $16. And then advising people to, pay with their conscience. What we found is that because the target number is not a round number, the dancers who can put in a 20 and don't ask for any change. Those who can't pay what they can.
Great. All right. I think we have time for a few more.
Yep.
Okay.
We only charge students $5. That's
Okay.
the only thing we have.
So it's like a split rate.
Yes.
Great. We want to pay our bands and callers more, which means raising admission, but we're reluctant to do so as many groups, our attendance is like many groups, our attendance is declining. So what are the suggestions about how to raise attendance or how to raise prices when it might decrease attendance?
Don't. No, seriously, don't. If you're suffering from declining attendance, that tells you that the product that you're offering at the price that you're offering is not capturing your audience's imagination. If you raise prices, more people are not going to show up, and in fact, you'll probably lose people. So you want to look at why it is that people are not coming and see if you can solve that problem, or you want to find a revenue stream that is not based on attendance at the door.
Great. So if they want to have a new expense of paying bands and callers, but can't raise admissions, then finding another revenue stream?
That's exactly what this is all about.
Great. All right, here's an interesting one. With the exception of Chattahoochee partnering with the city-owned venue, most of the suggestions in this web chat involve raising money from the organization's constituents directly. What other sources do groups have to bring in funds to sustain their organization? So not going to dancers, musicians, callers, organizers, where else might you find money?
That's a good question. We have actually not gone outside of our group to get money. So I can't answer that.
Great. If anybody listening has suggestions, feel free to add them to our chat window so you can answer this question also.
Government grants?
Yeah, grants are a possibility. All right. Just an observation from one of our listeners that if you're considering a raffle or 50-50 drawing, you should check the state gambling laws because in some states it can be complicated or expensive. So just a head up that raffles might have implications depending on your state. I think that's about it. We have some other feedback here that there's some resources for free survey sites. If you do want to pull your dance, and a suggestion that maybe local restaurants would give you a kickback if you had a special code from your dance that they would bring in, then the restaurant would donate to your dance if you drove customers to that restaurant. So that's a great innovative idea. All right.
Okay, have we gone through all the questions that we need? We do have more time. We're ending at 8:15.
Great. Here's another one. During camps, the attendees have paid large sums to be there or might be there on scholarship. So what are some fun fundraising ideas beyond a raffle or one-time a year event?
Raffle for the one-time a year event.
Oh, for the one-time a year event. So if you're at a camp and you've already paid a large sum to go there, are there ideas that you can raise money for that one-time event without doing another raffle while you're at camp? Any ideas about that?
So at camp fundraising is its own particular thing because you are de facto only fundraising from that small pool of interested people who are there, who have already paid that money or won their scholarships. So I think you, again, need to go back to what it is that people there would be willing to open their wallets for, or how it is that you're going to raise money outside of camp to cover camp. Because if the raffles aren't working and if the auctions aren't working, you know that you've reached the capacity of the people at camp to open their wallets.
Yeah. Any ideas for those outside of camp fundraising?
Direct mail?
Yeah.
Direct appeal? Sponsorships?
Right. If you're fundraising for anything over a long term, you need to tell the dancers constantly that you are, that there's the possibility and have some place for them to donate to, or like we have a little monkey at the box office for our third musician fund, so they can easily slip extra change in there. So something like that So you ongoingly do it in little drips and drabs, and they can all add up rather than doing a big drive for money. So you do it over the course of a year, but you always bring attention to it. It should be on your website. It should be at the box office. It should be in the announcements.
Great. We've got some great suggestions coming up in the chat that we'll definitely post with the slides later. Here's another question. Does any group ask the musicians who sell CDs at dances to give a little back to the dance for each CD sold?
We do not.
We do not.
That's an interesting idea I hadn't heard of before, but.
No, the concert hall where my orchestra performs charges a flat fee for any artists selling CDs or merchandise. And what that has meant is that artists have stopped selling CDs and merchandise.
Great.
Okay, well, I think we'll move along. The results of the chat bar will be posted on our website as well. So next we will hear from Emily Addison. I'd like to introduce Emily. She's from Ottawa, Ontario, and she's a consultant for CDSS and doing an amazing job of compiling resources for music, dance, and song organizers. And she has some interesting statistics for you.
Hi,
Emily?
folks. Glad to be joining tonight. The graph that's on the screen is from a survey that we conducted last year in 2019 of CDSS affiliate members. And if you're not an affiliate member, just as a heads up, that's the group membership option, which is pretty fantastic and you may want to consider. So the data that's up on is of all groups across North America that are CDSS members. I shouldn't say all groups that are affiliates. It was 48% of our affiliates filled out the survey, which is an astoundingly high response rate for a survey. We were thrilled. So we heard from 140 different groups across North America. And this is a question that we asked, which is really exciting to talk about in relation to this web chat. We asked how the organizations fund their various activities. And we gave them this list of possible funding sources based upon our prior knowledge. And then we asked them if they had other suggestions as well. So you can see most groups are collecting fees at the door, whether it's a sliding scale or pay what you can or a set fee. Almost 90% of the groups are collecting money at the door. But if we look at all the other types of funding, full 2/3 of the affiliates use at least 3 different funding sources. So the majority of groups are not relying on one funding source. And you can see membership is a very popular option that groups are using. So they'll have their cost at the door, but at the start of the season, they'll also have a membership. And from my experience, they'll get a little discount every time they come to the event. There's different ways that groups set up their membership for the year, but it seems to be quite effective. Other ones that I just wanted to highlight were Rob brought up the profit margin at special events, so like a dance weekend. And 1/4 of the groups who filled out the survey said that they are building in profit margins for their special events. So that's a very common approach, especially considering some groups aren't running special events, so they wouldn't even have that option. And then there was Susan mentioned the ideas of individuals sponsoring events, and so did Rob. That is, again, 1/4 of the groups are using some sort of strategy like that. So it's quite common. Even if it's a new idea to you today, people are using these. And then I was excited to see, for instance, 16% using an annual appeal. That's something that I haven't seen very close in my geographic region, but I have heard stories of people having great success with annual appeals. So this is just to give you a sense that there are groups across North America that are using many different strategies. And there's lots that we can learn from each other in terms of how best to implement these ideas. Something that we were starting last year was to create a booklet, a handout of some of the best practices for certain of these ideas. So for instance, how do 5 different groups do the annual appeal and examples of letters? We started collecting those, but then in our community resources portfolio, Linda and I have had so many other things on the go. So we do hope to return to pulling together those ideas and sharing them out. But in the meantime, I think it's really important to encourage folks to reach out to each other and find out who's using these strategies, and find out how they're doing it and what's making it successful. All right, so that's just that slide. And then Linda, you wanted me to talk a little bit to the next one as well?
Yes. Yes, we're going to wrap up the web chat by sharing various resources available through CDSS and other sources. And Emily is especially involved with the first 2 on the list. So.
Okay. Can I also mention shared weight? Would that be okay now? Or
I'm going to mention that in the next slide.
Okay, great. So the CDSS resource portal, some of you will have checked this out in the past. It just was had a great big renewal in January. So there are hundreds of resources there now. Those include sections now for callers and dance musicians and song organizers. There's a wide variety, but for about 1.5 years, there's been a section for organizers. That was the original portal, and those resources are all still there and are being updated on an ongoing basis. So you can go there and see information on fundraising and finances. That's one section of the organizer portal. So do check that out. And then at CDSS, we run a quarterly Shop Talk e-blast. So that's an e-newsletter that you would receive via email with information for organizers. That could include, for instance, an announcement about the next web chat, or about some new resources in the portal, that type of thing. And that's a free service. You can sign up for Shop Talk at the link there, and you can also see past Shop Talk issues.
Great. So other resources from CDSS include this web chat series, and on our website there are 6 previous web chats, and each one has a recording and the PowerPoint included. We also have outreach grants, and our next deadline is June 1st. And if you send a message to cdss.org/grants, it will come to me. I'm the person who coordinates our grants program. So if you have an idea of a way you would like to boost your community, maybe a caller or musicians workshop, etc., the grants are especially for those purposes. And all the information you need for applying is there on the website. We also have quarterly e-blasts for our CDSS affiliates. How many affiliates do we have these days?
Around 300.
Around 300 from the US and Canada. And there's a link there if you're interested in joining. There are many different benefits for CDSS affiliates. We also have a quarterly newsletter that often includes articles for organizers, and there's a link there. And last but not least, we have many week-long programs in the summer for music, dance, and song camps. And we are actively preparing right now to enter what I would call our scholarship season. And many scholarships are available. I'm also involved with coordinating our scholarships program. And we'll be doing our first round of scholarship awards in mid to late March. So it's not too early to be thinking about that. So for wrapping up this web chat, watch your emails tomorrow. I'll be sending out a survey to gather your input. We very much value any input that we receive from our web chat participants to help us improve our web chat series. And as I mentioned, we'll also be putting a recording of this web chat on the CDSS website. And so feel free to share this with others you know who weren't able to join us tonight. If you have any questions that weren't answered during the web chat, you can continue these conversations via Shared Wait, which is an online forum for organizers. Emily, could you jump in and say a little about Shared Wait?
Sorry, there, I'm unmuted. Yeah, so Shared Wait is an email list, effectively, of organizers throughout North America. So folks just like all of us on this call, and we're there for each other when we want to pose questions and get answers. So for instance, that's how I knew about Rob doing amazing stuff down south, and knowing about what David Chandler had posted about Country Dance New York doing really great things on finances. So if you'd like to continue this conversation, it's sharedwait.net, and you can sign up. You can get every single email by itself, or you can get a digest version, which is an email kind of every 10 emails. It will send you a grouping of them. So it's a really easy way to be connected to folks and continue the conversation.
Emily, I think you can better explain the next bullet point. If you
Yeah. So the portal, the resource portal that I mentioned that has hundreds of resources, is only going to be as great moving forward as the resources that we all share from our own communities. So we are encouraging you, if you've got great ideas or handouts or examples of appeal letters, that type of thing, to share them with us, and we will post those on the portal for other communities to see. So we welcome any resources from your community about finance, raising funds, or any other topics that you think would benefit other groups. We'd love to share those back out.
And the last thing on the list, web chats. We do offer these web chats to support music, dance, and song organizers. So our next web chat will be supporting organizers of community singing events. And the topic will be addressing current challenges. Our date is to be announced in mid-May. So we'll wrap it up by I'd love to thank our guests, Rob, Susan, and Jenny, for all the time you spent preparing for this web chat and all the great ideas and experiences you shared with us. And I'd like to thank every single person who is listening in tonight with us. We know that each of you are the ones keeping dancing alive in your communities, and given the state of the world these days, your work to bring joy to your community is helping the planet. So we also want to make sure that you know that CDSS is here to support you. So if you have any questions or any ways that you need our help, please be in touch with me. My email is there. And we would love to help you do the wonderful work that you do. So we'll say good night from CDSS and good wishes to you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Night.
Good night.